I initially discovered you when I used to have I had quite a big interest in like fitness, general health, and kind of biohacking, I guess you'd call it in the beginning. And my usual resources were the typical places that you would go to online. And then I would start to dive into like PubMed and go into studies. And really, I didn't have the kind of educational background or knowledge really to be able to put two and two together with these. So then I would seek out people at a higher level than me that had a more comprehensive understanding as to the specifics of some of the supplements, some of the way different chemicals work within our body. And then you were one of the people that I found in the beginning that immediately, as I started watching your content, I was like, yes, this is amazing. And so then I just followed along with your journey. So in a nutshell, can you tell, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, can you explain what you do and who you are?
Yeah, man. Well, yeah, I really appreciate that sort of feedback, because one of my missions at the very beginning of Ergogenic Health was to bring forward new, novel, and cutting-edge health information to the masses. And I always felt like I felt like my X factor was the ability to pinpoint new and exciting research or areas that I know people will find extremely fascinating, whether that be from a sports performance realm, because I've got I used to play soccer for a number of years. That's actually where my journey started out, was trying to biohack and optimize my own soccer performance and experimenting with different supplements. And I also, like, I was working in my dad's pharmacy at the time. So I was sort of like, that was whilst I was studying naturopathy. So I was sort of like in between, Western medicine versus natural therapies and supplementation. And then from there, I sort of got involved in a nootropic startup. So like I helped to formulate products from a very young age. And I just became really obsessed with like different ingredients, different dosages, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics. And I guess like I'm the mechanism of action guy. Like I love to learn about how things work and the pathways and how we can like tweak and modify different pathways.
And what would you say for your own kind of endeavors with it? What is the thing that excites you most? Do you have a particular goal, as in you just want to optimize yourself to be performing at your best, or longevity? Or, I mean, can those things go hand in hand?
Well, for me, I mean, my ultimate goal and objective is to acquire so much information and knowledge that I can eventually cast it and broadcast it to the masses, and really just and I've got the opportunity. I've been doing that currently. Like I've had the opportunity to like, gain further reach on different platforms like Ben Greenfield's podcast, Ben Pekulski's, Mark Bell's podcast, and just from there, one of my main missions is I really want to discover something new and novel, and I'm thinking that that particular thing will be an ingredient. I'd like to bring my own like supplement ingredient to market, whether that be, derived from a herb. It could be an alkaloid. It could be the next yohimbine, the next like caffeine. I'm just always on the hunt. I love just looking outside the box and seeing what else is out there, because there really is just like this whole world of untapped potential. And there's just so much within our reach that we haven't even scraped the surface. And that's what I really enjoy.
Yeah, it's so exciting to think of all the like possibilities that there are for you to be able to kind of delve into. And so for like Kahunas in general is we're focused on kind of helping coaches to deliver the best possible service to their clients. And I know that at the moment, especially, I don't know if it's just been a trend of recent, but there seems to be a really big focus on sleep. And there's a lot of different supplements out there that have various different proprietary blends or specific ingredients in them. And I wanted to kind of go into the role of like neurotransmitters, specifically serotonin, dopamine, how they affect our sleep, and then ways that we could perhaps optimize those in order to help people get the best possible night's sleep for their recovery.
Yeah, so it's a really, really important point. Various neurotransmitters can have either a positive or negative effect on sleep quality. Now, it's fair to say that serotonin, which most people listening in probably associate that neurotransmitter with promoting a good mood, which is debatable, question mark. But serotonin is actually can actually get converted into melatonin. So as far as optimizing neurotransmitters to promote sleep onset and to reduce fragmented sleep, what we want to be doing is increasing the inhibitory neurotransmitters. So that's GABA being the predominant one, and then serotonin is more so a neuromodulator, and we want to be dampening the production of the excitatory neurotransmitters. So that's dampening the production of glutamate, which is an excitatory, and that will, affect sleep in a negative way. And we want to be reducing dopamine, because dopamine's arousal, awakening, and energy. And the same goes for norepinephrine and noradrenaline, or adrenaline. So realistically, when we're looking at optimizing sleep quality, what we want to be doing is putting the handbrakes on cortisol, putting the handbrakes on like glutamate, adrenaline, histamine, orexin, and increasing like glycine transmission, GABA transmission. That's usually the way in which we see a lot of these like sleep formulas work, is by facilitating those pathways.
Sure. And so with that in mind, would it kind of make sense that as you approach your last meal of the day, so 3 hours, 2-3 hours before you're going to go to bed, to start to perhaps take some supplements at that point to kind of get your body to kind of relax a bit and get ready for the evening? Or would it be better just to 20 minutes, 30 minutes before you go to bed, you have something?
Well, it's a really good question, because I was just looking at GABA, because GABA itself, we now have the ability to supplement directly with GABA itself, and GABA is a neurotransmitter. We can't directly supplement with, like, let's say, dopamine or serotonin. That just doesn't work, but it does work for GABA. So if you take GABA actually under the tongue, so if you get like the capsules, or if you take the powder and you put it directly under the tongue, that has a very fast onset, and that has a very pronounced, it promotes relaxation, a feeling of calmness, and it will also shut down like ruminating thoughts and overthinking. So something like that would be best utilized literally just before your head hits the pillow. So immediately before bed.
Okay. And so GABA specifically, there are some kind of, I guess, experimental supplements that people could take. So I'm probably going to butcher the way people say it, but Phenibut or Phenibut specifically, I think, acts on the GABA pathway. I've actually tried GABA before, and I'll take it in the evenings, normally with my evening meal, about 2-3 hours before going to bed, which could be the wrong thing to do after hearing what you just said. But I would find that it kind of starts to, I say, like, dumb me down. So it's like I start to feel more relaxed towards that kind of when I want to be going to bed.
Yeah. So GABA itself, it would work. It works very differently to, say, let's say, Phenibut, which you mentioned before. So Phenibut that's also a calcium channel blocker. So that remember that one of the reasons why a lot of these health coaches promote, or like fitness influencers all talk about the benefits of magnesium, is because magnesium is the body's natural calcium channel blocker. Like, it naturally has the opposite effect of calcium in the body. Now, Phenibut is a calcium channel blocker, but it's also a GABA B agonist. So there's different types of GABA receptors. There's GABA A, GABA B. The ones that are the GABA B receptors, they're the ones that are risky, very risky to agonize. And what I mean by that is they're the ones that are very prone to downregulation. And when we get downregulation of that particular receptor, on the day that you don't use the substance, so like the next day or the following days, there can be a rebound anxiety or a rebound excitatory response. And that's why Phenibut is highly habit forming and also addictive if you use it like consistently every night. It's more of it's one of those compounds you want to use like super sparingly for what I call a super sleep, where you just like, you want to do like a 12-hour sleep and just knock yourself out.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just anecdotally from my own usage, it's pretty much how I've used it, because I found that if I was taking it for more than say 3 days in a row, I would have to increase the dose considerably to have a similar effect. And then when I stopped taking it, the next day, day after, or even if I continued to take it, by like day 4, day 5, in the mid afternoons, I would start to get extremely anxious. I could almost feel like, feel like beta receptors are like pumped up and adrenaline's flowing. Like it'd be like that sort of feeling, like jittery anxiety. So I then have to go cold turkey and just come off it.
Yeah, and actually, what you bring up there is like this the typical scenario of developing tolerance, which also occurs with compounds like caffeine. That's probably the one that most of your listeners can relate to. Is like having to titrate up the dosage of caffeine to elicit the same effect as day one. There is a class of medications and supplements that possess a really unique effect known as reverse tolerance, which means that the longer you use, like if you keep using the same dosage back to back to back, like let's say for 7 days straight, on day 7, the potency of that dose is more effective than on day 1. And that class of supplements and compounds, like that really interests me because then the user doesn't have to rely on increasing the dosage. And I think there's actually some compounds found within ashwagandha, which it is an anti-stress herb and it will help with sleep. There are some constituents found within ashwagandha that actually possess reverse tolerance effects. And in fact, in some studies, I'm pretty sure it actually outperformed diazepam, like the Valium, in terms of its ability to modulate the GABA A receptors.
That's pretty incredible. And do you think, like, how does the process of that take place? Is it that the half-life of a supplement is extensive and so it's building up so that by the time you're on day 7, like within your blood, you'd have a higher level of that particular supplement? Or is it that there's like a cascade, like a downstream of things taking place that just sort of like perpetuate themselves into something bigger?
Yeah, it's a good hypothesis. I think that's potentially the case. I think also there's like an epigenetic reprogramming of particular. It's the mRNA expression of these receptors. They can actually be manipulated and changed, and it happens all the time with a range of different herbs. Like I know curcumin can, from an epigenetic standpoint, upregulate like glutathione production in the liver, and that's why curcumin is notoriously good. It's well known for supporting liver health, is because it's upregulating the genetic expression of like NRF2 and things like that. But yeah, that whole category of like reverse tolerance compounds, that really excites me. Another compound that's somewhat GABAergic that has a pretty potent effect is megadosing L-theanine. Have you ever tried L-theanine?
Yeah, the highest dose I've probably done is like 600, 700 milligrams, I think, something like that.
Wow, that's a modest dose. The max that I went up to was 1,200 milligrams.
Wow.
And that
How
just
did that
felt like
feel?
I just felt like I was floating, like I was just floating in midair.
It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, I think it reminds me of like moderate dosage of CBD oil with maybe a bit of like chamomile, for example. But I mean, I looked up the LD50, which is the lethal dose 50, which is like a safety threshold. And L-theanine has a very high safety threshold. So for those listening in, don't think that I just randomly try supplements. Like I always do my research.
Yeah, I can't imagine you just would arbitrarily pick a random dosage and just take it. So with coming on to L-theanine, I think that's a good one to kind of segue onto. Is that the type of, so first of all, what does L-theanine do? And what would be the timing of that if like trying to get ready for sleep is your goal?
Yeah, so L-theanine is really unique because it has an anti-stress effect via multiple pathways. The predominant one is the fact that L-theanine can actually block glutamate signaling. And glutamate, as many of you are aware, the best way to think of glutamate is like, just think of MSG when you go to, an Asian restaurant, sometimes they'll add MSG. It's like highly excitatory. It gives you a sensory alertness and like that. It's a sensory dynamic that's really addictive and like increases energy acutely. However, the following day after MSG or after a big glutamate dumping, we get what's known as excitotoxicity or neurotoxicity, and that leads to a drop off in cognitive parameters or cognitive domains. And that's where L-theanine is so effective at counteracting any type of glutamate toxicity that can occur, even following, for some people, if they respond negatively to gluten. One of the reasons why people get brain fog from eating gluten is because it can mess up the GABA to glutamate ratio. And that's possibly why those individuals also seem to respond really well to taurine, which I'm also a massive fan of. That can also block glutamate signaling. But in terms of L-theanine, if we go back to the other mechanisms of action, so these are this is off the top of my head, just thinking back to the studies that I've read. Number one, it has anti-cortisol effect. It has an anti-adrenaline effect, blocking glutamate signaling, increasing alpha waves in the brain. So promoting that sense of calmness, almost like mimicking meditation. And it also has some modulatory effect on dopamine and serotonin. And it also inhibits histamine. So it's a mast cell inhibitor, so reducing mast cell activation. And histamine is another pathway that can really dramatically hinder sleep, affecting sleep in a very negative way. When histamine levels are high, histamine promotes wakefulness. So by blocking histamine, we're going to be seeing a reduction in wakefulness. And this is actually one of the mechanisms by which modafinil, the smart drug or the the psychostimulant that a number of people use, modafinil is a drug that can increase histamine, and that does the opposite. It actually, causes wakefulness.
Wow. And I didn't know that about modafinil. I didn't know that was one of the mechanisms of action from it. But with histamine specifically, is this where then, was it kind of like a byproduct of creating antihistamines that they found out that this would actually make people drowsy and put them to sleep? And if so, what is the kind of long-term damage of using an antihistamine if I was going to use it for like years at a time to promote sleep?
This is a fantastic question because there is a particular antihistamine drug that I actually really like, but it's not one that I'd ever encourage people to use long term. And obviously, this is not medical advice, by the way. This is just hardcore biohacking. There's a drug known as cyproheptadine or cyproheptadine, which is one of the very first anti-serotonin drugs and antihistamines developed on the market. And it's the one that I actually can say we at least have a good predictability on like what it's going to do, how it's going to work, how long it's going to last. These are the typical effects. And that is an antihistamine. So it's blocking the histamine H1 to H4. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 receptors. I believe it's more of a potent H2 antagonist. But one of the side effects associated with these antihistamines long term is that a lot of them actually have anticholinergic effects. And the anticholinergic effect is what can increase their risk of developing memory issues or even their risk of developing potentially Alzheimer's disease, because acetylcholine is incredibly important for memory formation, learning, focus. And so this is, a potential side effect with using these potent antihistamine drugs long term.
And so with that particular antihistamine you talk about, I believe, isn't that the one they prescribe if someone has like serotonin syndrome? They'll give them like high levels of that to like, because it's the only antihistamine that brings down serotonin. Is that right?
That's exactly correct. Yeah, it's an anti-serotonin medication that's used in hospitals in intravenous. They actually use it. I'm pretty sure they use it intravenously to block serotonin syndrome, which is it's a phenomenon that occurs, and it can also occur in a number of individuals sorry, that have that combine too many serotonergic drugs together, and that can result in serotonin syndrome, which is characterized by like fever, shivers, muscle tremors, bizarre bowel movements, and things like that. And so cyproheptadine is used as a frontline therapy to counteract that.
Interesting. And if you're taking any antihistamine to go to sleep, and let's say, I'm going to use my mum as an example, because my mum takes them every single night. And now she's at the point whereby that behavior is so conditioned that if I gave her a placebo pill and switched it out, she would still think that that's the thing making her go to sleep. Like, she's that conditioned on this. So I wonder if someone is hell-bent on using this for long term, could they supplement with acetylcholine or supplement with something that is going to perhaps offset any potential damage that could do?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely true and possible. I mean, when I use cyproheptadine, I'm so aware that I know it's also blocking my like cholinergic transmission and neurotransmission. So what do? I mean, I'm not going to just be like, am I just going to like push through it until the drug fades out, or am I actually going to be smart about it and load up on choline donors like alpha GPC, acetyl L-carnitine, or high dose vitamin B1? And when you get that right and you correct that anticholinergic effect, you're like, I just like I've just biohacked this Medicare. I don't know. It's just like you're just you're outsmarting the drug.
Yeah, that's impressive. And so I know we've kind of touched on serotonin a little bit, and won't go into too much of the weeds of it, because I know I've watched a few of your videos on serotonin, and I highly recommend for anyone that's watching this to go and check out Lucas's channel and look at the serotonin videos. Now, I would say, would it be the wrong assumption to say that you're not a fan of SSRIs?
I am not a fan of SSRIs. Yeah.
Okay. And so specific to sleep, what are the detrimental effects of SSRIs?
Yeah, well, I mean, SSRIs are pretty notorious for actually disrupting REM sleep quality. And interestingly, what I think is actually happening is many people aren't aware that serotonin is actually, it's oftentimes considered to be a neurotransmitter that has a modulatory effect on mood. So keeping people feeling content, making people feel content and satisfied with how how they are and their perception of the world, having a dampening effect on the highs and the lows. As far as sleep quality goes, I mean, you're a good case scenario. I mean, you said that you noticed it affecting the quality of your sleep. Did it increase nighttime awakenings? Like, did it cause fragmented sleep in your case, or?
Yeah, and it still does, because I'm taking it to this day, and I can get off to sleep super easy. So I think with the supplements I take and the stack I have in place, for me to wind down, and including other things like sleep hygiene and stop eating like 3 to 4 hours before I go to bed, all those sorts of things, I can get off to sleep super easy. I'll then wake up probably within 90 minutes of falling asleep. I'll get back to sleep again. Then I'll wake at like 4 hours after going to sleep. And then I'm up. Like, I average probably 4 or 5 hours sleep a night. Like, I just can't, at that point, I cannot go back to sleep no matter what I do.
Wow. Yeah, actually, also part of that is I was just thinking about different pathways. The I believe it's the 5-HT4 receptor, the serotonin type 4 receptor, that has an effect on cortisol release, and also the 5-HT2A receptor. And there's actually evidence suggesting that 5-HTP, which is precursor to serotonin, in healthy humans, 5-HTP can actually increase salivary cortisol levels. And that's interesting, because you'd think, like, how would serotonin increase cortisol? Well, it's because it's binding to that 5-HT4 serotonin receptor, and part of serotonin's effects is actually to work in unison with some of the other stress hormones like prolactin. Prolactin is not a hormone that men want to have elevated, and serotonin can directly, have an increased prolactin. So there's definitely some interesting pathways there when it comes to SSRIs and sleep.
And is there any supplementation that you're aware of that somebody could take if somebody was on an SSRI? Anything that they could do that perhaps might help them in I guess staying asleep, because that being the main problem.
That's where I'd probably go about it through the GABA, like through optimizing the GABA pathway. So, focusing in on compounds like lemon balm extract, taurine, L-theanine, amoxipine, and potentially even etoxaphene, which is another one. Like these are compounds that have a pretty potent GABAergic effect without the typical side effects of benzodiazepines. In fact, there's a new one that I'm going to be releasing a video on my channel soon. It's called Grandaxin, which is it's a medication that's used in the Ukraine, I believe, or Russia, one of those Eastern European countries, and it has a pretty pronounced effect on upregulating GABA production and actually working to the same degree, to same potency as some of the like benzodiazepines without the withdrawal or side effects.
Interesting, because that was going to be the next question. Is with the drugs like diazepam probably being the most well-known one, they can or appear to promote a good night's sleep if you have them. But what is actually going on there, and what is the detrimental effect of long-term usage of something like that?
Yeah, well, if we look at the actual pharmacokinetics and the actual mechanism of action, some of these compounds they really are chemical straitjackets. So what that means is that, like, for example, some of the potent benzodiazepines, they actually will, like, the way in which they promote sleep is they just cause a tranquilizing effect on the body. And some of the ramifications associated with using these compounds longer term is that they can lead to this severe state of GABA A downregulation and a following withdrawal of some of these medications. I mean, there's number of, I think Jordan Peterson may have posted about getting off benzodiazepines or something, but it's probably one of the hardest classes of medications to come off. So like once you start on these medications, they can be really difficult to wean off due to their effect on GABA A activity and receptor count, and also the sensitivity of those receptors become desensitized.
So if someone was taking those, would it be best for them to kind of just wean themselves off whilst trying to implement strategies to help them sleep, like ones that are going to be better for them long term?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, obviously the titrating the dosage down, like slowly weaning off, is really important. Never, quitting cold turkey, but then slowly trying to implement some of these other strategies that we talk about. Even agmatine, which is an arginine metabolite, that one there has helped a number of clients wean off benzodiazepines, and that's because it's a potent NMDA antagonist, and it can also promote glycinergic transmission. And so, like, we can stack like agmatine. In fact, I think I did a on my YouTube video, I did a Valium recovery stack, which was agmatine, lemon balm, taurine, and GABA itself. And that concoction there, theoretically, based upon all the pathways, should do a pretty damn good job at helping someone get off those medications.
Awesome. We'll link to that in the description as well, so that people can click straight through to it. So let's talk about your sleep stack. Like, if you have a sleep stack, what is it? And what do you do outside of just supplementation to ensure that you can get a good night's sleep?
Well, to be honest, my sleep stack at the moment is pretty simple. It actually, I only use one compound for sleep, and that's, I'll load up again on taurine before bed. And that's because by the time by the time it gets to like 10:30 at night, and I've got all the red lights on in my house, and I've got the blue blockers on, and I've got like calming music and things like that, and I've like trained my ass off during the day. Like by the time it hits like 10 o'clock, 10:30, and I've been working for like 13 hours, like I am so ready for bed. So my sleep stack, it used to be more sophisticated, and I used to be way more experimental, and way like I just used to trial different things all the time. But really, the one thing that I say is like good quality sleep begins the moment you wake up. And the reason I say that is because you want to be getting outside, like in the sun, exposing your body to the sun, because that's really going to reinforce melatonin signaling that evening. And then I also try and aim for 15 to 20,000 steps per day, because that's like generally a good practice, what I've found for like keeping cortisol, low, and things like that. But really, there's also some sleep optimization foods that I'll gravitate towards, and that will be sometimes some pistachios, because pistachios are rich. Well, one of the nuts that are known to massively increase blood levels of melatonin. In addition to pineapple, pineapple is a good evening snack, and then also kiwi fruit. Kiwi fruit has been shown to improve sleep quality in healthy volunteers as well.
And we're just touching on melatonin there, and I know you've talked about some of the downstream actions of melatonin being produced. If someone isn't doing any of those things and they're perhaps struggling to sleep, would you ever suggest someone directly taking melatonin?
Yes, I mean, I think melatonin can be used long term sustainably, as long as they're using less than 1 milligram every night. I think less than 1 milligram is better as a sustainable ongoing treatment. Um, if somebody's suffering from a really bad case of the flu, or they have severe infection, or they have massive amounts of inflammation, or some sort of sickness or disease, you can dose up to 10, 20, 30, 50 milligrams of melatonin without causing, it's not toxic. It won't cause massive side effects, and that can have a really potent immunomodulatory effect. But just in my case, what I found with melatonin is even exogenous use of melatonin, I will still wake up feeling pretty average like the following day. Like I don't feel like I have as much spring in my step the following day. So that's why if I ever do use it, it's 300 micrograms, which is zero point 0.3 milligrams, and it's 0.3 milligrams of a 6-hour extended release form. So it's like it's like microdosing, really low dose of melatonin, and it's trickling into your system, not just like immediately before bed.
Yeah, I don't think, like with those dosages, I don't think I've ever seen, not here anyway, a supplement. They start at like 3, 6, 10, 12, and then I think maybe 15 or something is what I've seen. Like they immediately go in at what sounds like a sledgehammer to get the same result.
Yeah. I think life extension, they should,
Oh yeah.
I'm pretty sure they still manufacture 300 microgram capsules of melatonin.
Okay. And just one more thing I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned taurine a lot and that you're using taurine. And I guess for some people, they'll be most familiar with this I'm sure it's in energy drinks. So they might be wondering why, if you're going to bed, would you take something that's found in an energy drink?
Well, lo and behold, taurine is not a stimulant. For those wondering, it's found in energy drinks because, well, there's actually two reasons why I think Red Bull decided to put taurine into their energy drink. The first reason is because they probably knew that too much caffeine can cause anxiety or jitters and nervousness. And taurine has the opposite effect. It can calm the body, reduce panic, reduce irritability. And that's why it's so easy to combine. That's why it's so easy to drink Red Bull without feeling too wired, because the taurine dampens the excitatory, dampens what I mentioned before, blocking the glutamate signaling, or at least suppressing that. and increasing GABA tone. And the reason why I like taurine is because not only will it help with, neurotransmission, highly neuroprotective, blocking the damaging effects of fluoride exposure, can block that. It can also assist with male hormonal optimization, which is what I'm very well known for, naturally optimizing testosterone. And that taurine can saturate in the testes and act as a very potent antioxidant in the testes as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Like, there's so much information there for people to digest, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. Where can people find out more about you or get in contact with you?
Yeah, so if they head over to my YouTube channel, that's Boost Your Biology on YouTube. Check that out. And also, if you want to listen to my podcast, that's also Boost Your Biology. They can check out those two platforms.
And before you do, sit down, make sure you're comfortable and settle in, because once you've watched one video, I guarantee you're going to watch the next one and the next one, and the next one.
Yeah.
And rewatch them. I go back and visit some of your old ones and go back through them. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the podcast, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Yeah, no worries, Mark. I really enjoyed the chat. I knew it'd be great fun.
Cool. Thank you.